So I'm going to talk a little bit about Eurovision Song Contest. For those of you who don't know about it, it's a world premiere song contest in Europe that has a lot of different countries that are competing for best song. Typically, it's using an insane amount of technology, probably more than a Super Bowl halftime show type of thing. So I'll go through a little bit of that today. Why am I here in front of you? I started Megapixel in 2017 and have been innovating in the LED space and LED processing since 2002. So I'm going to talk very specifically about the kind of LED side of things and media workflow side of things as opposed to specifically all of the broadcast switching. Previously, I founded Element Labs and then Revolution Display. Next slide. We innovate a lot of visual technology as well. People that do know our company think about us as LED processing, but we actually are very involved with many people in this room, as well as a lot of Hollywood filmmakers and people building out a lot of production technology. We have a very large patent portfolio for distributed video technology. We've got a couple Oscars for VFX and Emmys and things like that. So we're very pervasive in a lot of the technologies. So any questions later, please let me know. So back to Eurovision. A couple of key facts about Eurovision. This is a very long-term planning for the show. So even though it debuts in the springtime and it's a very kind of scheduled day by day, week by week broadcast, we actually start planning it 2 weeks after the previous year. So planning for 2025 has already started. So even though a lot of the technology that's on there is kind of concert mode, be ready 24/7, load in quickly, load out quickly, the set and the scenery and the infrastructure piece is actually thought about a little bit more like a studio installation. And that's what helps with a lot of the rapid changeover. There are official technology suppliers like us that get very involved because the show is so demanding from a technology perspective. They want to know that not only is there a phenomenal production company or production companies in some cases, but they want the direct manufacturer support as well. And very oftentimes there are new technologies that are actually developed specifically for the show, and they debut at Eurovision. This year was the first time since 2009 where a single supplier was used for every technology aspect of the show. So that's lighting, sound, video, and broadcast equipment. So that was NEP Group and CT all under one roof. Fantastic company. Next slide. A little backstory, we've been involved in Eurovision since 2021, but this is the first year that we were brought on as a specific official show technology partner. They wanted to run the entire LED system on SMPTE 2110 and all of the infrastructure upstream as well. It was kind of funny because last year, this time, when we were talking about what tech could go onto the show, we were all talking, this was together with CT, saying, oh, we absolutely need to do a whole 2110 broadcast. Nobody's done this before from like soup to nuts for the entire, every single piece of the chain. And the show producer was like Googling like, what is SMPTE 2110 while we were talking. But once we had this conversation, it was like, absolutely yes. We want to incorporate all of these different aspects of technology into one big network. This sounds exciting. And it's also a push. Next slide, please. There are a lot of pain points in Eurovision, but as well as a lot of these live productions, things like this room, all the way up to a Super Bowl halftime show. We have to move a lot of video data around, and we want this video data to not only be unidirectional, we want it to be bidirectional so that we understand what's happening on the other side. We want that metadata, and we want completely redundant systems because we want failover capability, and we want that subframe as well, not just not just a failover switch that's happening after a few frames. That's no good on a live broadcast. Rehearsal time for Eurovision specifically is very tight. And so we wanted to make sure that we could do these changeovers from band to band or from song to song very quickly. So let's move on to some of the visuals. This is an image of the stage. This is a very typical camera shot that you may have seen. This is what it looks like from the audience. So these were cubes that were moving up and down in automated rigging with video on all of the different surfaces. All of the cubes were actually run on a single 100 gig 2110 stream. So all of the different surfaces were brought in on a single MAC address destination, essentially. So again, showing the flexibility of 2110, not just being a 16:9 raster or a bunch of 16:9 rasters, but be able to put a lot of different video surfaces in a very large Ethernet payload. Next, please. This is a good example. This was, I think, Sweden's entry. This is a little scenic piece that was very specifically designed for camera. Like, this was very closed in, like a little box. So this wasn't necessarily something that was great for the in-person audience. It was very much more for broadcast. But just an example, this scenic piece had to load in, be QC and fax checked and ready for broadcast in 45 seconds. That's how long we had. So this is very similar to a Super Bowl halftime show load-in, where all these things are coming in and out. And with the ability to pipe video data from anywhere in the building and be able to switch sources with NMOS was absolutely critical for this type of thing. And then I think I have one more visual here. This is what it looked like from the house. You can see the front of house is decently sized. There's a lot of control there. In the overall array of LED floor, back wall, and all those cubes, it was about 2,300 LED tiles. And all of the LED tiles as well are running an Ethernet-based protocol. So after the multiple 100 gig signals are hitting us, we're then sending out a whole bunch of smaller 10 gig signals over fiber. And I could talk about that a little bit in subsequent slides. So the network plan actually was quite elegant. We had a red and a blue network. I know some people will call this like a purple network as well, because even though there were two networks, there wasn't really specifically one as a main and one as a backup. They were just both always running at the same time. So front of house had two networks. Back of house with the video engineering racks had two networks as well. So this looks very similar to what an IT infrastructure site plan might look like, but we were using it for video. Next one. So the network plan, this is basically a kind of a grouping, different visualization of mostly what was on the previous slide. We had a combination of 200, 100, and 25 gig connections. We had basically 25 gig connections from the media servers to the core switches. Those were disguise servers with 25 gig outputs. Each 25 gig had a 4K feed that went into a large pair of Arista core switches. And then out from there were 100 gig links going into our Helios processors. Each of the processors were taking a primary and redundant dual feed on the 100 gig link. And we were using 5 basically main and 5 backup processors in the system. And I'll describe later, even though we call them live and spare, they're not really quite live and spare. They're all operating at the same time. So on the LED processing side, we consider our protocol a little bit of a precursor to SMPTE 2110. So we saw IP-based video as my engineering team very early on as something that was really nice for LEDs, because all of these tiles, and we call them a tile because there are literally thousands of these things that click together to become one large surface. These all need to be interconnected. And so the best way that we could figure out to interconnect them was using Ethernet. And so we started kind of in the mid-2000s, so let's say 15 years ago, we started experimenting with IP video traffic to LED tiles. And so all the tiles that were on this show, we actually make hardware that goes inside the tile. We don't manufacture the display device for this particular show, but we do make the hardware that goes inside of it. So it's basically our hardware, operating system, firmware, and software stack that's running in there. And it's not 2110, but it's kind of a 2110-like payload. The video looks very similar to 2110, but we have a lot more metadata happening because some of the refresh for LEDs that we need to do on camera can run up to like 20 kilohertz or 30 kilohertz, not 60 FPS or 50 FPS. So we're running things at an order of magnitude higher, which means that kind of normal PTP, normal Genlock, normal metadata tuned from the panels is not quite enough. And then we also want a lot more, we want more analytics because, you know, when you look at a system that may have, let's say between 5 and 20 cameras, and you may have a dozen media servers, we've got literally thousands of tiles, and each one of those has a MAC address, and it's an endpoint for IP video. And so we need to really understand what's happening on the tile network, kind of at a deeper level than what's happening on the payload network upstream of that. So this is just kind of a very simplified version of how the tiles get connected. So when you were seeing on the earlier slide the red and blue network, we actually have a primary and backup or kind of two simultaneous running systems, and we actually feed the tiles from two directions. So every tile has what it considers a home port, which is the first controller that it connects to, and then it has another port, which is a downstream port that may go to other tiles. So these things daisy chain, a little bit like Christmas lights, and then the last tile goes back into the network again through a different Helios. What this does is allows the tile to ingest two video signals that are the same signal simultaneously. So we had a primary and a backup signal from the red network, a primary and a backup signal from the blue network. So that's basically 4 signals coming in to the same set of LED tiles. The LED tiles are then able to very intelligently decide which video stream it should be listening to. That's user definable, so you can click a button and tell them to listen to this port versus that port, or you can leave the tiles in a mode where the tile will actually do like a CRC check and on a packet by packet basis insert. Next slide, we'll go through these kind of quickly. So this is what the racks looked like. Rack space was so limited for this particular show that we were actually on the other side of catering. So we reduced footprint by about 90% from the previous year. We had a 1.4 terabit network driving all of the LEDs. Everything for us on the 2110 side is uncompressed, which is why we're running multiple 100 gigs, because we have to butt signals together. So whenever you do tiling, you can't use compression because you don't know what the compression engine and the decompression engine is going to do for spatial and temporal. Next one. Using a lot of APIs, because this was all network-based, we worked very closely with CT to develop monitoring dashboards that were useful for different departments. So I don't expect anybody to be able to read this because it's kind of small, but you can kind of see, you know, you've got like green, and I don't think there's any warning errors on here right now, but they were able to actually see the status of every single group of LED tiles. So these were grouped by displays. Next one, I think we had for network utilization. So this was all of the network bandwidth happening both on the Arista side as well as downstream from us on the tile side. So you could see that we were loading 1.35 terabits out of the 1.4 that was allocated. Next one, and we'll show you media servers. So this should show us things like disk read speeds and how much bandwidth is used on the 25 gig links. And this is really cool because, you know, if you have an SDI cable or an HDMI cable, you have no idea what's happening on that cable. You don't know what metadata is being reported. You don't know what's happening in terms of, you know, is it a good cable? Is it a bad cable? Are there packets being dropped? This is an amazing tool to help people know what's going on in the system so that it can get corrected before you'd have a visual problem. So I'm going to race through these. So traditional data path is basically all of these units daisy chaining together, server, router, processor, et cetera. In a new workflow, and we have all these metadata failure points, right? So in this new workflow, next one, please. Everything just connects to the switch. The switch basically is the router. It's software defined. This drastically simplifies everything. Next one. This is too small to read, but you'll get it when I tell you what this is. This is the red network and the blue network that were shown earlier. This is the entire system topology for that incredibly complex show, fitting on basically 2 PDF pages. There's no way you could do this with traditional broadcast infrastructure. Next one. So on the Helios side, we were ingesting 8K and multiple 4Ks. One of the things that we love about 2110 is that we can ingest non-standard rasters, like up to 32K, and a lot of this is compatibility pre-tested with a lot of different vendors, and that's the show. So thank you.